Listening. Okay, I talked about it before. I talked for 40 minutes, in fact, about listening. So this video, I'm not going to be talking about the same stuff here. I'm actually going to be talking about a different aspect of listening. So don't just click away from the video and say, I'm not going to watch it. I've already listened to him for 40 minutes. I'm not going to listen to him anymore, talk about listening. It's different because in this video, we're specifically talking about listening to sounds over the dialogue. The dialogue is what we primarily care about. Yes, we do like to record every single little noise that happens. If somebody rings a doorbell and the doorbell is practical at a location and the director says, I really like that doorbell. See if you can find the source of it, record the doorbell for them as a wild. That's great. If someone is cooking on a stovetop and you don't see most of that stovetop because, you know, the shot's living in here and you don't necessarily see the person cooking, then by all means, see if you can get a wild track of them cooking the meat on set or whatever, you know, you happen to be cooking if it's not meat. But that is secondary. Believe me when I say Culver City has miles and miles and miles of listings of special effects that are different types of things cooking, and they could easily throw any of those things into, any of those sound effects directly into the show. So don't worry about that. They will have that done. But in this video, we're specifically talking about dialogue, okay? Because dialogue is what we are primarily for. That is what we can't replace. We can't switch that out with somebody different unless they are if they are a voice actor and they are hired to sound like a particular somebody. A lot of the times actors, if they are, big time actors and they just don't want to be bothered with ADR, they don't want to be bothered by certain things like that, that's when you'll have to worry about that kind of thing. As a matter of fact, on some of the bigger shows that you see on TV, like for example, Walking Dead, they don't bother with the actors themselves doing growling and breathing and stuff like that. They actually hire separate people to come in and breathe for them. And they hire them specifically for their breathing. So that's a trick that sometimes happens in big scenes like that with talent. They don't want to necessarily bother talent with it because they don't need to. The actor's voice themselves is more difficult to duplicate. Someone that ends up dying in the middle of production, for example, like on The Crow with Brandon Lee, or the guy who played Proximo in Gladiator, if they had any scenes that required dialogue to be spoken after they're dead, after they died, then they had to hire an actor to come in and replace their dialogue. And not necessarily replace, but to actually deliver their dialogue so that way it could be recorded and they have it for the show. And that would be in ADR or on set, most likely not on set though. That would only be like if it was CGI, if they were reshooting it, which I think they did in Gladiator, but I'm getting sidetracked. Here's what I'm specifically referring to. If you can see it, you can hear it. That's the rule we go by. If you can see it, you can hear it. Now, if you don't see it, you don't need to hear it. Sounds pretty self-explanatory, right? I'll say it again. If you see it, you can hear it. If you don't see it, then you don't need to hear it. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm talking to you right now. And if I am suddenly doing something down here off camera, you don't know what in the world I'm doing. I am doing something, but you don't necessarily know what, right? I'm banging on something. You don't see that. All you see is me. But you sure hear it. You don't know what in the world I'm doing though, because you don't see it. Now, it doesn't matter if I'm just taking my phone and banging it on any kind of a surface that there is down there. You didn't see it, so most likely you're not going to know what that is. But now that I've told you, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. But on TV or in movies, you might know that an actor is building something or doing a prop or playing with a prop or something like that. You don't need to hear it. If you are in a shot like this over the work that they're doing, over the action. So what actors can do is they can pretend to do something. If, for example, an actor is cooking over a stovetop and they're cooking in the wide shot and you see them with the flame going and you see the meat cooking and them, moving the spatula around and whatever, that if there's steam coming up and it goes in front of their face, then obviously you're going to have something similar to that on the coverage when you go into this size or this size, wherever the scene happens to play. If it's in that size, and you see the smoke coming up, then obviously they're going to have to do that. But, and maybe they'll say, for simplicity's sake, go ahead and cook again. But you want to get that dialogue clean. And if that sizzling of the meat cooking is over the dialogue, it's going to interfere with your dialogue and your track. So you want to eliminate that noise. So when you punch in for the coverage, you say, can we shut that down? Now, again, if you shut it down and the steam is no longer there because it wasn't cooking into, it's not cooking and sending smoke into their face anymore, then that may be the DP saying, well, we don't have the smoke anymore. We got to have the smoke. So if you don't have that, then I'm sorry, we're going to have to cook the meat because we got to match. But if you don't, if the smoke was very small, or you heaven forbid, had an extractor fan on because you were shooting on location and could not shut down the extractor fan, then what you can do in that circumstance is when you punch in for the coverage, have them pantomime, which means basically mime the action. Now, that means that I look like I am still preparing the food and whatever else, but I'm not actually doing it. You see, I look like I'm doing something down here, but you don't know what I'm doing. And that's because you're in this size. If you don't see it, you don't need to hear it, remember? Now, that does mean, though, that sound of the cooking meat, you will probably want to get wild. And by that, I mean basically record a track of it. So you'll ask the first AD to give you quiet, so that way you can record, with the microphone directly on, right over top of the meat being cooked or whatever it happens to be. And that way you can get a good track of it. That would maybe mean getting the meat cooking by itself, and then maybe getting them to stir around a little bit of it in different ways and manners. That way, post could add that in at the level that they want, because they don't necessarily need to have that sound effect over the dialogue for it to play correctly in the scene. As a matter of fact, it's probably better that it doesn't, because if the dialogue is being delivered, let's say, at the level that I'm speaking right now, and the meat is sizzling, at that level, that's pretty loud in comparison to the dialogue. It's very much up in there. They may want to drop that to get more clarity in the voice, but they can't do that if it's dead quiet in the background. They might have a difficult time matching that meat sound, which is the reason why you would give them a wild track of the meat being cooked. That way, if they want to add it in there at a lower volume level, they could. Most of the scene is going to play in shots like this anyway, so you might as well just give them the wild track and hope for the best and let them just piece it together. Now, about this as well, another note on this whole dialogue noise sounds over your dialogue thing. That's just one example. But if, for example, I am taking something and putting it down directly over my dialogue, that is a different thing altogether. That's, again, an actor messing with a prop. And pretty much anytime an actor is messing with a prop, you can expect it to make some sort of noise. The trick is, though, if you see it, you can hear it. If you don't see it, you don't need to hear it. For example, if I am taking my phone and putting it down on a table, we'll pretend my hand here is a table. If I put it down over my dialogue like this, that sound is now married to my voice. My voice has now been recorded with that sound coming down straight on top of it. Now, better actors, and actors that are aware, I should say, of what they're doing, they will know to put it down in a gap in your dialogue. Do you notice right there what I just did? I stopped my speaking for a split second, put it down, and then continued. But you didn't really notice. It seems fairly, straightforward. And if you're watching TV and movies, then you will most likely know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll hear this and you can see this. An actor that puts something down specifically over their own dialogue is basically giving post a little bit of something to deal with. Now, post can get that out, but it's something, do they have the time? Would they rather do that, or would they rather ADR the line? Would they rather take it from another take if they have that option? They piece it together with syllables or cover it up if they have the time. They don't always have the time because, sometimes you can only have a matter of, a couple of days before the show airs for post to finish getting an edit done, especially with regards to sound, because it's usually the last step in the process. So if they have to ADR anything, it could be ADR'd in the weekend before it airs on Tuesday. It could be very soon, after that they finish everything and they finally get it off to the station to air. But basically, in a nutshell, any sounds that are committed to the track the same time as the dialogue is going to be a potential problem for post. So if I am putting something down off camera and you don't know what it is that I'm doing down here, you don't necessarily know that I am banging around and just spinning my phone around, and you don't know what it is. You don't need to see that I am just simply doing this over and over again. This is candid, right? Remember, I'm speaking directly to you. I'm not talking, I'm going to edit this out. So that was a little benefit you have from watching me, in this candid mode in this channel, in this series, I should say. That right there was over. If I drop something like that, for example, and I'm still speaking, then post is going to have a field day trying to get that out, because I did a lot of noise. And I'm just sitting there over and over again, just banging the thing for no reason. Well, if we don't see it in this size shot, we don't need to hear it. So that would be where you start to, you talk to an actor and you say, we're not seeing you, we're like above this, can we not get that? Can we not hear that? And as a matter of fact, you don't typically address the director directly. You would mention this to the first AD or the director and let them address the actor. Now, what I will say to actors, if I don't want to direct them, because that is not allowed, I'm not the director, I'm not allowed to direct them. What I can do is make them aware of something, though. I will sometimes, depending on the actor and actress and how receptive they are and how cool they are, I will sometimes say, just to make you aware, we're above your hands, and we're not seeing you, bang around the table, your phone on the table. We're not seeing you hit the phone on the table. Whatever the case may be, I'll make sure I word it something like that. I'll say, for example, what would be another good example? When you say to someone, we're not seeing that action, or you say, by the way, I'm just making you aware you put down your cup right over your dialogue. And they'll say, oh, okay, I shouldn't do that. Just making you aware. That's one example right there. You can basically make them aware of something like that, and chances are they're going to correct that themselves. Let them correct it. Now, what they can say is, but wait a minute, sound told me not to, and that's when they could look at you and say, sound, did you direct my actors? To say, no, I just made them aware that they were doing that. Still, depending on the director, I've had some directors say, Alan, are you directing my actors? I'm like, no, sir, I'm not. And I've had them say very similarly, say, why are you telling my actors to do things? I'll say, I'm not actually. I was simply making them aware of a sound concern. All right, well, in the future, make sure that comes through me or the first day. Absolutely. But then directors are sometimes not concerned with such things. And if they're not concerned with it, then if we need to save a track in something like, a take like that, it's one of a couple of different things. You can say, okay, fine, whatever. You want to just let them do whatever they want to. You'll fix it in post or the ADR or whatever else. Not my concern. Directors signed off on it. Fine. But a lot of the times you don't necessarily want to just give up and sacrifice your track like that, especially if it's fairly easy to do something about it. Now, if informing the actors does not work, you can go through the first AD. You can go through, ideally, the first AD, because the first AD is the person that works with the director to direct talent. Now, if it does not change the performance itself, they can make an actor aware of something. And sometimes there'll be the liaison there, if the director is too busy. You don't necessarily have to bother the director with every little thing. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't bother the director with anything unless it is specifically some sort of a direction that is hosing you, that is hosing your sound. That would be where I would go to the director and say, it would be best for sound if they didn't mess with that, crank the thing during the take, and they'll say, yes, I see your point. Okay. Maybe they'll crank it. Let me see if we can work it into cranking on not over dialogue. Another example of this, putting things down and not marrying sounds to your dialogue. I did a scene a few years ago on a TV show called Necessary Roughness. There was a scene that took place around a dinner table, and there was the mom, and there was two kids, and there was the boyfriend. They were all at the dinner table, and their phones start vibrating. Text message in. This person has a text message. This person has a text message. Their phones start going off. And what they did on set was they kept having the sound effect. The director was standing by right there and he kept hitting a button and it would go ding, ding, ding. And over and over and over again, it was making ding noises or vibration noises or whatever the case was that he wanted it to be. And I was like, can we not do that? And he's like, well, what else are we going to do? I said, can you snap? Just do a little snap like that. The actors will hear it and it'll be a lot easier for post to actually deal with and save. He says, and he's like, I'm not sure they're going to hear that. I said, can we do a test? He said, okay, yeah, that's fine. Let's run a test. And what the director did is he was right there next to set and he read the script along with them. And later somebody else did it. But he basically sat there, he ran it, had the actors do it, and then he did this number. And it was also a lot less distracting to the actors, they came to find out. That hearing a like that, and that was the notification for the phone, that was enough to make the actors like, oh, I got my text message or whatever for the scene. They did not have to completely drive themselves crazy by hearing ding, ding, vibrations, whatever the case may be, because it is distracting to actors. It is. Sounds over dialogue are not necessarily props related. It could be something in the background. It could be that you have an airplane going over your set. Obviously, there's nothing you can do about that. But what you can do is listen for the lines that are being affected by it. If you do only like 1 or 2 takes and then you move on, if your second take has an airplane that goes over the same part, you know you do not have that dialogue clean and you should not turn around. That would be where I would go as a boom operator, and I would tell the director if they say, okay, we're moving on. I'll say, hold on 1 second. I'll run to the director real quick and say, we had an airplane go by over the same lines. It was this line, and this line, the same exact lines, both takes. We don't have that line clean. We don't have that clean just yet. Then the director will most likely say, okay, well, let's go a third time then. Or they may say, we don't have time. We just got to turn around. Sorry, I'll have to fix it later. It's their choice, but they are the director and at least they're aware. They have a lot of things going on. They know the schedule of the day. They know at what point they're supposed to go inside. If you're behind schedule, if you're trying to get things done before you lose the light and the sun goes down, whatever the case may be, they understand certain things like scheduling. And if they don't have time to do another 2-minute take, then they won't and they'll move on. But at least they are aware of the problem. So that way later they won't be like surprised and blame the sound department. Now, the background sounds may not necessarily be just an airplane. It could be people. It could be footsteps, for example. Background people walking around in an office environment. If you don't see them, you don't have to hear them. So if there's a person like me directly on camera and you have me in a wide shot, you're going to see all the people in the office moving around. But if you don't see that many people in this close-up because it's just a very tight shot, then you don't need to have those people back there doing all of these activities. They don't need to walk all over the place. And if so, perhaps if you're on a stage, they can take off their shoes. Some sets allow you to do that. Some say, no, because they could step on something. We don't want them stepping on a nail. That could be very damaging. But you can do that. They could then suggest, why don't you put down carpets? Well, if you have time, sure, I'll carpet the whole place. But carpets do take time to do. And just putting them down for background people, which they can't just put background actors in one place, like just in this one hall. It's going to most likely be, I'm sending one guy down here, then I have one guy coming up this way. There's one guy that walks down all here, then over here, then walks up the stairs. Can't do anything about that. But the people that are on camera, those people, if they are just in this small little 5-foot section of area behind them, can they start closer to the edge of frame? Can they just start and walk through here to here? Then it's very simple to carpet maybe 10 feet, that 5-foot gap with a few feet on either side. Now, they may say that's going to throw off our timing. Well, chances are actors are going, and background people even, will know about where they cross certain places. And better second ADs and PAs will be able to say, well, it was actually at this point when we were sending people through. I don't want to sound rude, but it is something that is not going to make or break a shot if a person walks through slightly, like 1 step or 1 second off from when it was, but they take their job very seriously, just like we do. And so they may say, no, I just for timing's sake, we got to do it this way. I gotta cue them here because they got to cross the exact time. Okay, fine. You take your job seriously too. I take mine seriously. Is there a way that they could maybe not wear shoes? That might be one of those things where they would say, okay, fine. Or they say, all right, fine, I'll just have to carpet everything. Another option would be foot foaming or something like hush heels. Now, foot foam is basically like if you imagine a disposable like a neoprene that is kind of like a foam. It's spongy, but it's not really foam per se. It's not like foam like this kind of foam. It's more like neoprene in the sense with a sticky on the back or like a mouse pad where you stick that onto the bottom of someone's shoes. You can also, for the ladies in their heels, you can put heel caps on, which are like rubber caps that you can just stick on the cap, and that way it takes the curse off of their heels. That way it doesn't have that really hard sound of just a clip cloppy, like it sounds like wood almost hitting something and just walking clip clop. It's really bad. That's a very hard sound. And if you don't want to put carpets all over a big, huge room, and they have to, and they insist on doing doing it where they send all the actors everywhere just for consistency's sake, or because the background people already know the path they're walking and stuff, that's when you would employ something like foot foam and hush heels, and that does take more time. Now, if you have one particular set, like in an office, that always does the same thing, you can do this and say, well, I need to, and you go talk to the second AD and you say, I need to get all people that are going to be walking through this to get approval from the sound department before they go to set. Oh no, they're going to be approved no matter what. Yes, but I need to approve their shoes. And it's just a very simple process. It's not going to take a lot of time, but right before you need them on set, before you set their background crosses and whatever, just bring them by me. Let me look at their shoes. I may want to put a quick pad on something like that. It doesn't take much time. It's just like, okay, step for me. Okay, walk from here to here. Your shoes are fine. Walk from here to here. Your shoes are fine. Walk from here to here. I need to put something on your heels. There you go. This size will work. You put them on your heels. Okay, great. Next person. You're fine. Next person. Nope. You need this on the bottom of your heels. There you go. And there you go. Simple procedure. You're able to kind of work your way through a big group very quickly. Now, if it's only a couple people, then obviously you can foot foam them or pad or whatever. And I'm not saying go completely crazy with the foot foam. You don't need to go and trim around the entire shoe and make it just pristine and perfect. Don't go crazy. You don't need to on a background person. They're going to be out of focus and that big in the background for that long. And you're most likely not going to be zoomed in focused on their feet. So if you give them, for example, pre-cut squares that they can just take that and stick that on the ball and heel of their foot, something like that would probably be enough, if depending on what they need, the ball or the heel or wherever on the shoe is making noise. Now, that is specifically just regarding feet over the dialogue. But there is also other actors talking over the dialogue. If two actors are speaking and they're jumping each other's lines, you need to have a gap in that dialogue in order for post to correctly cut it together. Now, post can always take two lines and overlap them together. That's not a problem. They can easily do that. They can do that all day long. What they cannot do is separate two lines that are recorded over one another. If someone else is talking and they start talking directly over me as I'm speaking to you, then it can be very bad if they get into post, because you can't cut into my voice at any particular place, because there's going to have that person's voice over it at the same time. If they're just coming up with the sentence and I jump them, then the end of their sentence is going to be over the beginning of mine. I can make it difficult for post to cut. So in order to get over that, or not necessarily get over that, that's the wrong way to put it. In order to help with that, what you can do is if you have a big overlap scene and the director's like, I need to get this for the energy and whatever, get your second boom. Get your utility, your second boom op, whatever you happen to have, and have that person boom the person that's overlapping the person on camera with another boom that matches in dialogue, in the actual microphone itself. So if you're using a DPA 4018C, the other person needs to be using the DPA 4018C. If you're using an MKH 50, if you're using a CMC 641, Sheps, whatever the case may be, matching microphone at matching height. So if you have one actor and you put the microphone 6 inches over their head, you cannot have the other actor with a microphone digging in on their, forehead right here. That doesn't work. That does not work at all. Because the height and the presence and everything needs to match both people. Okay, makes sense? It's very critical for that to happen in order to save overlapping dialogue. So in general, how do you go about listening to the sound of the person's voice and how to make sure that there is nothing over their dialogue at the same time as you're booming? It does take time. It does take practice. You have to unfilter out everything you're hearing so you don't just ignore every little bitty thing. There could be keys jingling on a police officer that walks around the scene. That's going to be over the dialogue. And you don't need to hear it. That would be something that you could talk to the props department and get them to put some Joe Sticky stuff or something on there to quiet it down. If there is someone that's typing on a keyboard and you have a big laptop scene and there's a whole bunch of people on their laptops, they don't need to actually be hitting the buttons. They could just pretend like they are because they're hiding behind a screen, right? The screen comes up in front of them. You don't need to see them, do this number and hear it. They could just be pretending to type. That doesn't need to be over the dialogue. You know what I'm saying here? The less you have over the dialogue of the actors, the happier everyone's going to be, especially when they get to post. So it doesn't matter if it's props related or if it is a background thing that can or can't be controlled. You want to listen out for that. And while you're listening, listen for everything specifically affecting the people who are talking. It does take time to train your ears to do this, but you will be a much higher demand boom operator for a sharp ear than you will be if you just let everything go and completely forget everything. So try to train your ear like that. That is sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.